This episode of Planning Aces is brought to you by the folks at Planful, the pioneer of financial performance management cloud software.
Hello, on today's episode of Planning Aces, we'll be featuring FP&A insights and commentary of three finance leaders, including CFO Andrea Hecht of CSAA Insurance, CFO Matthias Steinberg of Mindbridge, and CFO Brian Hoagland of Packer Fastener. This is Jack Sweeney, your co-host, and we've been waiting on our co-host and resident thought leader, performance management guru, Brett Knowles, who earlier sent us word that he was stuck in traffic and expected to be delayed. But never fear, Brett Knowles joins us after this.
Ready to plan confidently, close faster, and report more accurately? Here's what sets Planful apart. Imagine purpose-built applications for every department, from FP&A to accounting, marketing to HR, all with built-in financial intelligence. It's easy to implement Planful in just weeks and with minimal IT involvement, so you can rapidly and seamlessly engage everyone across the business on your key financial progress. Best of all, Planful grows with you. Its unparalleled scalability ensures that no matter how fast your business expands, Planful can keep up. See why over 1,500 customers worldwide choose Planful as their flexible, user-friendly, end-to-end financial performance management platform. Go to planful.com/CFO Thought Leader to see how you can reach peak financial performance with Planful.
So you have traffic in Canada?
Yeah, well, it doesn't happen often, but, once in a while you get, 2 or 3 canoes lined up and you kind of have to wait for your turn to shoot the rapids. You know how it is.
It's that summertime tourist traffic. You're
Well,
not a tourist. You have the lake house.
we're getting comfortable with this idea of being the 51st state. So right now, we celebrate our nation's holiday on July the 1st as opposed to the 4th. And so now people are beginning to warm up for that. So, again, you get a day off. So if you take this week off, you end up getting an extra bonus day and that kind of stuff. So it's the standard, what we call the silly season, as people jockey around their holidays to the best way possible.
Well, this week was perhaps not as silly a season for those of us on this side of the border. We'd be happy to trade you and sit in traffic. Canada could be at war with Iran right now.
Yes. Well, it's, you never know. We might be. So, I mean, it's staying away from politics. It's interesting, how it's come here in Canada. Like Canadians, are just more liberal minded, than many nations. Ironically, we're so liberal minded, even our conservatives are liberal minded. And so it becomes harder and harder to tell the difference between them. In fact, our new Prime Minister, Carney, was once an advisor for the Conservative Party, but now he's, the Liberal Party leader. And that's not uncommon. Like a little while ago, the fellow that run our Socialist Party actually stood in for the Liberal leader for a chunk of time. So our parties don't have that broader spectrum. And in fact, most of what our current Prime Minister Carney is doing is what the opposition proposed, the Conservative opposition, last year. So he's taken basically what the opposition wanted last year and put it in place. So now the opposition can't really fight with him because he's busy doing all the stuff that they had proposed. And so, which is funny, but as someone who, votes for people, how do you differentiate now when the lines are so blurry between them and they're taking the opposite party's policy and implementing this? It's quite an interesting time for us.
Well, we would have to believe that Canada has begun scrutinizing more closely its own strengths and weaknesses as a nation.
Well, on a global basis, I think it's interesting the disruption that has occurred and the new alliances that are forming, or maybe the old alliances are forming. And I'm not sure it's a good or bad thing. As I've mentioned to you before, I think here up in Canada, we had an over-reliance on America's good-natured tendencies towards defending our country and so forth. And maybe this is just a reasonable course correction that will set us in a better direction.
So in part, the mindset is that opportunity surfaces where change and, new circumstances arise.
Well, I think a lot of unintended consequences. Like, it's hard to predict what's going to happen from any one of these activities. And so, yes, it's been disruptive. I think it's merely interesting that it's been, on the whole, I'm going to call it a creative disruption. In other words, I think that all nations are making better decisions going forward. So, and obviously on our topics, it impacts all of us as business people. As we like certainty, we like the ability to be able to predict what's going forward, and this is disruptive to us and forces even greater agility. And luckily we sort of warmed up that muscle during COVID, and luckily tools like AI are coming along to enable us to become more agile right now. But for your listeners, for the FP&A crowd, I think we've got to begin doing stuff differently. There's a different cadence that's required based on the new cadence in the economy. And it'd be nice just to pick on any one leader, but I don't think it's the domain of any one leader. I think Russia has caused disruption. I think Israel's caused disruption. I think, the pressures in the Middle East, they've all been causing disruptions. It would be hard to attribute it all to any one leader, it seems to me. So again, it comes back to, in the business world, so what? What can you do about it? Obviously, you can't change politics. The best you can do. So we used to call this turbulence, and the model of turbulence in the business world is, either you're a Microsoft or an Apple with a huge amount of cash reserves, like an aircraft carrier. It doesn't matter how turbulent the ocean is, you can just plow through it. The rest of us have to move with the turbulence. You can't fight that wave. You have to learn how to move with that wave and position yourself like with a boat so you don't get capsized. And I think, that's the interesting data point for, you and I and your listeners. How is it, given we can't change the politic, how is it we thrive in this chaotic environment?
Yeah, well said. I think your point about, AI has come along just when sort of agility is required more than ever. So hard to plan and forecast what the future might be in 30 days, less not 6 months. So
yeah. What was that? There's a great thought leader that said something like, sometimes you don't get what you want, but you get what you need.
Thank you, Mick. Why don't we move to our planning aces, if that's all right? In fact, I'll point out that all three of them, part of what they share is that they're all championing AI tools that enhance agility.
That's good. And I'm with you. I don't want to spoil the story for your listeners, but I think this conversation and probably the next dozen you and I are going to have, it's just exploring how organizations are moving forward with AI. And I think as we sort of dissect what we're hearing, there are several common themes, but I think there's also a lot of flailing going on. Yeah. A lot of arm movement and water splashing, but not an awful lot of progress forward. And I think it's just as important we talk about those as we talk about, some of the progress forward we are seeing.
Talk about some of the flailing. Talk about yeah.
Right. Because I think we're all flailing. Like, we're all trying our best, but we know that there's going to be a lot of energy exerted that isn't going to be directly causing motion forward. Doesn't mean you can stop flailing, but we have to think about the ROI on things that we do differently. Again, if you don't do anything about it, you're going to get run over. So you've got to do something, but recognize it's not going to have, really a hard ROI that you can calculate in advance.
Well, then I'm just going to tee up our first planning ace, who will be Andrea Hecht, who is today CFO of CSAA Insurance Group. Now, she stepped into the CFO role in 2019 after she led a major FP&A reorganization where she aligned finance with the company's strategy and strengthened overall enterprise decision-making. You can hear all about that in episode 1102 of CFO Thought Leader. But here is Andrea.
We've really tried to embrace generative AI in a responsible manner. I mean, clearly, I kind of call it, there's two different buckets of AI from my seat. There's productivity tools that, many of us are starting to use every single day, like ChatGPT, Writer.com, Copilot. And then there's thinking about different ways to transform the business. And so one of the things that we're looking at is, one of our largest bucket of costs are our claims costs. Obviously, we're an insurance company. We pay claims every single day, right? So how do we use generative AI to help make that process better and more efficient? And when we say more efficient, we're not talking about replacing people. We're just trying to make those people more efficient in their day-to-day, jobs. And that's an area too where you have so many claims that you're handling every day that if you can use generative AI to help you not make mistakes, that'll be hugely, hugely beneficial to the bottom line. From my seat, I would say just holistically looking at generative AI, one of the things that I'm focused on is trying to make sure that value propositions are there. I think this is an area where your investment dollars could really, really eclipse your value proposition if you're not trying to do it smartly. And so we're trying to keep it somewhat focused on key initiatives while still ensuring that people have the tools that they expect to have. Obviously, I think generative AI is one of those spaces where people are going to expect that they have those things to help them do their jobs every day. And so you can't fall behind in that area, but it's a balancing act for sure.
We'd like to always ask about the build versus buy.
My favorite conversation.
Yeah. There are a lot of insurtech vendors out there, and I'm sure there are lots of AI tools that they would love to sell you. But what guides your decision when you develop something in-house versus buying one of theirs?
Yeah, it's interesting. We as a company for a long time, and I mean like decades, had very much, I would say, a tilt more towards build. And I think what we're learning is that to be quick and to figure out how to adopt things quickly and get them in service quickly and really be more efficient, you've probably got to look more at the buy functionality while ensuring that you're getting the best tools out there. I think the best thing that you can do in this type of decision is you can't have, I would say, IT by themselves making this decision. You've got to have the business at the table, really driving the business requirements, IT understanding what it is that the business needs, and then figuring out if there's a tool that you can easily buy to help meet those requirements. And I think that's where people sometimes get sideways, is I think many, many times people think that they can build things that you could probably easily buy. Balancing act. You've got to have the right people internally to help you figure out the tools to buy and how to deploy those and how to, most importantly, maximize the value that's being driven out of those tools. But at the same time, I am a finance person, so I know anybody who wants to ask for headcount or any project out there is going to want headcount. And so what we've tried to do, I would say, internally here is the executive leadership team has come together on multiple occasions to really put together a generative AI strategy. And then we're trying to let the strategy guide the decisions below. That's not to say it's perfect. There's certainly been friction with regards to how quickly we're going to deploy some of these things and how many people to hire. But I think that we're at least trying to keep it somewhat confined and then figure out, as we successfully deploy a few of these things, how that looks when it's scaled.
Well, again, that's Andrea Hecht, CFO of CSAA Insurance from episode 1102. In my abbreviated hand, I wrote strategy first, then scale with intent. She covered a lot of ground, Brett. What remains top of mind for you as you were listening?
I'm going to highlight a couple of common themes that I suspect we'll see across the next three planning aces or next two ones to come. One is, and maybe it's three. First, I'll say is very careful wording. I noticed that when you ask these questions, it's like landmines, and people are very, very conscious of how they answer it. And my second point is one part of the answer is always about risk aversion, data security, all that kind of stuff, and do it in a very designed fashion. And then the third common point is it's not about headcount reduction. It's and that's where I think some of the conversations fall apart, because the common theme, the way that's broadcast to us, I think I'm hearing, is we're going to grow without adding more people. So again, the carefully scripted answer is we're not letting people go with AI. We're just going to grow faster and not need to hire people. And I don't mean that in anything other than just an observational way. As we at FP&A talk to our colleagues, the learning is be careful with your wording, make sure you get it right. Always make sure you talk about security and data integrity and all that kind of stuff. And then also, the lean in is on growth without headcount addition, as opposed to staying the same size and reducing headcount.
Andrea talks about the importance of confined innovation. She touches on build versus buy tension. Brett, in your experience, what are some of the organizational missteps that can occur when finance isn't at the table?
Sure. Well, so beyond that, and I'm saying that as a cursory. I know it's motherhood and apple pie, but it's something that we should all be mindful of. What Andrea brought above that are three major things. One is, it's about transforming the business. And in her example are things like make fewer mistakes. And as someone that's put through insurance claims, we're all happy that would happen, because a lot of mistakes happen, a lot of aggravations, try to sort things out. And so, I like that. And she puts it down as efficiency. I'm not sure what category I put it into, but, she said efficiency. The second thing was, and a good lesson for all of us, be very mindful of what your value proposition is. So don't just chase AI because it's exciting and shiny. Does it support that value prop? And that's super important, because obviously there's a lot of dead ends. A lot of investment that's not going to give you payback. So make sure it's consistent with your value prop to your customers. Then my next takeaway is, and I love this quote, people expect to have the tools. So a year ago, people were saying, you're not allowed to use ChatGPT, there's all sorts of risks with it and so on, don't use it. She's now saying people expect to have the tools, whether it's Gemini or Copilot or ChatGPT, whatever it is, they expect to have those tools. And I believe that to be true. And I suspect that if an employee had a choice between two companies to join, one that uses AI and one that doesn't, they're likely to choose the one that does allow them to use AI.
Listening.
And so I'm extrapolating her expected, but it dawned on me that that's right, that they expect to have it. And to say to a potential new vice president that we're not using AI here, or a new employee, is going to close that opportunity for you.
Also, Andrea talked about the importance of confined innovation, and she explores the build versus buy tension that exists as well.
Right. But
Yeah.
when my babble before is trying to say somehow or the other, we have to get the wording of that right because people don't want to feel that they're going to get replaced and their job goes
Yeah.
away. So the obvious answer is we can grow without hiring new people. It still means that people aren't getting hired. The good news is merely people you don't know.
Well, that underscores that widely spread piece of wisdom we keep reading on social media. AI isn't going to replace you, but someone who uses AI is going to replace you.
Yeah. Or again, where many of our clients were a year ago, which is they were pushing back saying we're not using AI because of the risks associated with it. If I were to say the glass was, half empty, not half full, I would say, well, you might lose great candidates because
And so those with the power to hire have to send out the right message, the right signal. And that is that they need to let prospects know this is a AI forward company and we expect you to use the tools available to achieve.
Yeah. Or again, where many of our clients were a year ago, which is they were pushing back saying we're not using AI because of the risks associated with it. If I were to say the glass was, half empty, not half full, I would say, well, you might lose great candidates because great candidates are going to expect to have the right tools. Like that's Andrea's quote. And as I extrapolate that, I think she's bang on that, whether your organization has resistance to it or not, all of us need to be aware that a young buck employee, someone who's up and rising, would see that as a career limiting situation and might choose to go to a different firm.
Brett, our next CFO, works for a Midwestern industrial supply company that supplies nuts and bolts and fasteners. It's known as Packer Fastener. I guess it's rather ordinary.
Well, you might say that, but it turns out statistics indicate by far the largest percentage of millionaires come from those traditional businesses. They don't come from, Facebooks and LinkedIn and all these innovative things. They're just, good old things like fasteners.
Well, we are looking forward to having sharing this clip of CFO Brian Hoagland, who joined us a while back and gave us a skinny. He's one of those AI forward thinking CFOs in, like I said, a rather ordinary company, making a big difference by championing AI tools and approaches. Here's Brian Hoagland.
So again, one of the things we've done within our organization is we put together what we called AI 101, where we really just tried to introduce some of these concepts to the larger organization. We had this about a month and a half ago. We had our first hour, really just later in the day, come into our training room, hop onto a Teams call, just listen to some of the things. Here's some of the tools we're using. And we're using some of our finance examples in that training to say, hey, here's some things that we're doing. It might resonate with you, maybe in a sales role or in a procurement role. You start to connect the dots. So that was a really good amplification for us. Lots of really positive discussion after that session to talk about, I wonder if I do that. And you start to, even just things that we think we've got a good handle on, it starts to advance our own initiatives because of something a different department talked about. I think the agentic notion, it's a year ago, it was very buzzword. Everybody's talking about agentic AI, the agents. What we're starting to peek a little bit at with ChatGPT's models, with Manus, the MCP protocol to connect the different models, we're starting to see how can we use that to do some of the work that our teams are doing. The repeatable, call it low-hanging fruit things that, it's important for people to do this. It's important that they do it right, but we can continue to grow as an organization with the same core of people, but grow the business much larger because we can take some of those sort of repeatable tasks and have the agents do it. I feel like we're starting to scratch that, and as fast as all these tools are advancing, 18 to 24 months seems reasonable to start to deploy these. We've actually played a little bit with Microsoft's agents as a way for us within the Copilot suite to allow us to do some of that. So it's not just theory anymore. I think businesses that are the size of us excuse me, we would probably view ourselves as a little more on the cutting edge when it comes to technology and AI tools. We, we work with a lot of other, and I mentioned NetSuite. We work with a lot of other companies in the NetSuite space, and I think we see ourselves as somebody that's driving the change versus following the change. Larger other companies, peer companies in our area, some of them are even further along than we are, which gives you that sweet spot between there's a lot of things that we can watch and see how they're progressing, but also we don't want to be that following the trend too far behind to be caught, flat-footed.
What a brilliant move. Like, based on what we talked about from Angela, the idea of employees have a certain expectation about AI, the fact that he's doing this training sends a strong signal to the employees that we are, what do you call it, a forward-leaning, organization looking at AI, sending a very positive and constructive message. And of course, collaboration. We learn stuff in finance, but other people, we're going to go off and try it. So, culture is a huge part of this. So as much as IT is nervous about security, employees are nervous about job security, about all the other issues. And doing this training is a good way to sort of affect the culture. And so, kudos for that. The next part was, again, apple and mother pie. We got to do this safely. We're going to look for low-hanging fruit. We're going to do it right. We're going to grow without hires. So that kind of spiel. What's interesting is he said, well, we're on the cutting edge. And I think compared to our competitors and so on. Now, I say this somewhat facetiously. I think every last one of my clients says that they're on the cutting edge. In other words, we all think, why? Because we're stubbing our toes, we're learning stuff, and the answers aren't out there on the internet. So it feels like we're the first ones through. We might not be.
Yeah.
Very few most of us are on, I'm going to call it the cutting edge, but we're not on the bleeding edge. So the bleeding edge would have been you're doing agent stuff a year ago. Now it's a safer place to be. The agent structure's better built out in all the tools, and the security is now dealt with and so on. So it's still leading. There's still, huge amount of people. And we're very biased here, right? In North America, we're ahead of the rest of the world in AI for sure. And, way, way ahead of other places like South America, the African continent, even many parts of Asia. So yes, we are at the cutting edge overall. Within North America, you might be more towards the average of your North American competitors and compatriots. But all of us think that we're at that edge. I don't know if we are or not, but again, it's because we keep on stubbing our toes and learning stuff that you can't learn off the internet. Therefore, you feel that you're a pioneer in this space.
I think it's interesting. Both Andrea Heck and Brian Hoagland emphasize internal education, cultural buy-in, and productivity-focused AI adoption across departments, not just within finance.
Right. In conjunction with, make sure we're avoiding risky activities, and we're going to grow without hiring.
Well, we do have one more planning ace for you. I'll play the clip. It's Matthias Steinberg, CFO of MindBridge. Here's Matthias. We want to, of course, talk to you about AI as well at MindBridge. And we're wondering just about the MindBridge finance function, how you might be using AI. And I'm sure it's in multiple areas, perhaps, but what would you tell us?
Yeah. So how to use AI in finance is what we work with every day. And so being our own guinea pig is it's really part of the interest of my job, being in a company that builds technology for my peers. And if I just zoom out if you allow me to zoom out a little bit, I think the hiring currently is in MindBridge as a company. We did implement ChatGPT, we did implement Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, and this is very much around text-based tasks, right? I think large language models, they are amazing at working with text. I think everyone has experienced that, and they can really help any function in the company be more efficient. And we use it, and we have made it accessible. We also have an internal Azure-based platform for large language models, so we can safely use them in an internal setting. So that's the first thing. I think that's kind of almost like a no regret, no brainer move. The second thing is programming. So we have over 50% of our staff is in R&D. A lot of them programmers. So we're very, very research and development heavy organization. And I'm of course very interested as we scale, and we're basically running MindBridge break even, is how do we get more efficiency out of our teams. And so using agentic IDEs, so AI based tools that help developers develop faster is I think is the new standard. And the studies or the numbers that have been quoted or are being quoted are anywhere between 20% productivity increase to multiples to up to 2 or 3 times the productivity of certain developers. So I think again that's almost a no-brainer. Certainly, there's some complexities around data security that need to be addressed, but that is a second piece, I think, that nowadays, at least for a tech company, where there's a lot of value in using AI. And then the third piece is really in finance. We use our software on ourselves. This is very much also just to eat our own dog food, and we want to be, as a finance team, part of the product development process and be a sparrings partner both for product and for marketing. So using our software, I do believe that in finance, large language models currently have very clear limitations. And so relying, and I see that frustration when I go, like next week, we're at the Gartner CFO conference, which is for us kind of the biggest show every year. It's interesting for me also to just talk to other CFOs. I think there is really a little bit of a disconnect between a lot of expectations around AI and finance and the fact that large language models are not very good with numbers. And so that's where machine learning comes in, or unsupervised machine learning. And that's what MindBridge has been built on since 2015. Machine learning is it's very highly deterministic. Large language models are not non-deterministic by definition. It's a problem, right? So large language models are very well suited for numbers, and so I think the future really lies in the combination of both. The core analysis clearly needs to be done by machine learning, and then LLMs are a great addition to that make.
Yeah, I should have mentioned Matthias Steinberg joined us on episode 1103 back in May. And did you know that MindBridge is a Canadian-based company?
No, I didn't realize that. I'll have to stop all the disparaging things I was about to say. It's interesting because as I listened to him, I thought, I wonder if he's out of phase. And I even looked up when was this Gartner CFO conference he was talking about to find out whether you interviewed this guy like 2 years ago or something. Like all those comments seem to be inconsistent with what I thought I knew about AI. And I don't mean to be evil to bring that up, but I'm wondering if any of your other listeners are going to think the same thing. The interesting point is, towards the end, he kind of turned the corner. And the corner he turned was to say, in our business of sort of financial analysis, my words, not his, we can't afford to hallucinate. We can't afford to have any analytical mistakes, his words. And so we're going to use machine learning, not AI. In other words, this is not going to be at the discretion of AI. We're going to hardwire in a lot of this analysis because we can't afford to have any mistakes. Then he went on to say, but we use AI to make it easier to interact with. And that was the magic thing, because what he's doing is, in light of the other points about, be concerned about the risk. In his world, the risk is too big to have a customer make a decision based on something that AI might have made a mistake on, at least with ML, I can control the algorithm. I can control the logic that's going on, and I know it's correct. And I'd rather be correct and potentially miss some stuff than just rely on AI. And so he's saying, at this point in time, next year you have a different answer, but at this point in time, we have to use ML, machine learning, up to this point. Once we've got that point, and I'm sure that's, auditable, defendable numbers, then AI can make sure that it's easier to interact with. And so what that looks like are things like, I would imagine, and this is not his product, I'm thinking of other clients' products where at this point you could say, is there conflict caused by these accounts or between these accounts? And what I've seen AI do is say, well, there's no conflict. The numbers reconcile, but there'll be tension between this department and that department. So what's interesting about that is we didn't ask it about tension. We asked it about conflict, and it answered conflict in an accounting context with a good answer, and then took a step beyond to say, but there's going to be tension. And in this case, I said, well, what do you mean by tension? Define tension. And it came up with 3 categories of tension that it was looking at. Now, this is not stuff that the client had programmed into the AI. So if I reflect that interaction on what Matthias talked about, ML is going to take you to the right answers. Once you have the right answers, AI can give you some ideas on how to interpret it. So you're going to say, is there a problem with this budget? It's going to say no, but have you thought about this thing or the other thing? Now, so long as you consider AI to be merely another brain at the table, in other words, you don't just take it as rote, but take it as someone else's opinion, trust but verify, understand what's going on. In this case, it added something to the conversation that we wouldn't have and that ML didn't. ML gave you the right answer. AI gave you a spark of inspiration to take it a bit further. And so for the first part of this conversation, I was thinking, this guy's out of phase, but he's not. He's in a very, very risk-averse environment. You can't afford to make a mistake. Everything's got to be nailed down. Once you get it nailed down, then you have the opportunity of allowing that creative gap from AI to be developed and make it easier to interact with.
What you're highlighting there, one would imagine many organizations would like to replicate such an approach.
No kidding, because it goes back to everything we talked about. Like, how is it you could do this in a way that reduces risk? Well, the way is, don't use it holus bolus. Use your tried and true. If you want to go a bit, go into ML, but draw very hard rules. In my company, we've been building a bunch of agents that are basically going to replicate my brain. And we've got to work super hard for it to not go to the internet and use stuff that you put off the internet, only use the content that we're giving it. And we're obviously a bunch of rank amateurs compared to Matthias's company. But that structure needs to get built in so that we don't jeopardize your business model.
So as our clock winds down here, can we ask for just a short list of takeaways?
Well, my conclusion would be, I think we all have to forgive each other for a lot of flailing that's going to go on in the next while as we learn how to do this. Yes, we got to be safe when we do it. Yes, we got to be, careful that we grow without needless new hires. Yes, we got to be careful, like we learned from Matthias, to have the right mix of AI versus using, in his example, ML or just people. Like, I think there's a lot of lessons that we all better start writing down and having in our bulletin boards to remind us, because it's such a shiny object. It's hard not to fly towards the light.
Brett, thanks for making time for us.
See ya.